I didn't expect an egg-shaped sponge to be a global phenomenon. I never could have, in my wildest dreams, ever expected to be in the Smithsonian honored one of 8 women in the last 100 years that invented a product that changed the industry. Like never, never would I have thought an egg-shaped sponge, right?
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Conor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earned. Today we've got Rea Ann, the founder and CEO of Beautyblender on the show today. Welcome to the show, Rea Ann.
Well, thank you, Conor. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we could finally get together.
Yes, this is one of those ones where you scheduled a few times. I have conflicts. You have conflicts. The technology has conflicts, but we made it happen.
We did.
And I have to say, obviously I knew about Beautyblender. I knew about you, but I didn't know your full history. And it is fascinating. I don't know if you've written a book yet, but I feel like you certainly need to.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting life for sure. And by the way, not a lot of people know about my history because really the only thing that was ever relevant really to the world was my creation of Beautyblender.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a pretty big creation. That's a pretty big deal in terms of, if you had to have something tied to your name, that's a good one.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we start there then? Tell people your journey, because again, I think it's fascinating. We've got Eric Dickerson, Rick James, Oprah Winfrey, single mom, makeup artist, MTV music videos, Beautyblender, growing into a $100 million brand, et cetera. Tell people the story.
Oh my
how did you get here?
And so much more. It's so crazy when you take a moment to look back, because I'm so busy looking forward. It's been a crazy, wonderful, beautiful, unexpected life for sure. So I was born in Southern California. My mother was from Colorado. My father was from Northern California. Just fairly normal upbringing. I never had money, although my parents never made us feel like we didn't have money. It was very interesting how that trick they played on us, but it was good. I grew up in Southern California in a place called Westlake Village. I went to Agora High School, and then my parents got a divorce, and I ended up finishing down in Orange County in Newport Beach, which introduced me to a whole different culture. Like behind the orange curtain was really something different for someone like me.
I've never heard that before. I love that phrase.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. I love it. I still love the area. It was there that I cultivated my love for dreaming, really, because it was a new lifestyle for me. It was a fairly affluent, conservative area where I was not from that environment at all. So I was introduced to a lot of new things, one of them being an influx of very international people. So I met some people, ended up in Europe. Conor, this is a whole part of my life that people don't really know about. As I say, hindsight is 2020. When I think back at these times, and I'm talking about my teenage years to my formative young adult years, you never feel like you're smart or beautiful or any of the things that you aspire to be. But as I look back now, I was a young, innocent, beautiful lady that met a lot of really influential people that took me around the world, showed me even more about culture and beauty and fashion and all kinds of stuff. And I ended up fast forward. Okay, well, I guess I have to go into the NFL years.
Well, we're skipping you had the Saudi era too,
well,
right?
There was the Middle East, then there was Hollywood, and then there was the NFL.
Yeah.
And then there was production, makeup artistry. And that's really where Beautyblender came into play. But I really feel like it's the ingredients of the whole recipe that makes everything happen, right? So all the experiences as a young woman, meeting Arab princes and flying around the world, and then meeting future kings, dropping into Hollywood and hanging out with Rick and Stevie and Prince. Any given Monday night at El Provado, this club above Carlos and Charlie's on Sunset Boulevard, could provide you with the most crazy roster of people to rub shoulders with. And I ended up making a lot of friends, having a lot of experiences that really helped hone my desire to be a makeup artist. I
Yeah.
ended up meeting this young, newly crowned king of the NFL. Eric Dickerson at the time was the highest paid running back, and we hit it off. We ended up dating for several years and ended up having our beautiful daughter that we have now. That was one of the segues that kept me in California and no longer traveling international anymore. I fell in love and had this relationship. We had this child. And then suddenly it fell flat on its face. It was a horrible, horrible breakup, terrible situation. And I was suddenly faced with being a single mother, which I never planned on being. First, I was going to be a princess. Then I was going to be in the entertainment industry. Then I was going to be an NFL wife. And then none of that happened. And I was like, oh, holy shit, what am I going to do? First of all, let me just say all those things I was going to be were really predicated on the decision making of men. So I no longer wanted to be beholden to what a man wanted me to do or what I thought. And my mother was always very independent, and she would always tell me, make your own money. She never promoted marriage. She was like, don't get married, Rea Ann. So I started really thinking like, hey, there's something to what she's telling me. I need to figure this out. So I was essentially broke and about to be really broke. Children are like little bankruptcies in human body. So I had to figure it out. So I was really at this time very aware of beauty and fashion, just simply because who I was as a human being, as a young woman at the time, was really dependent on my attractiveness. I met these people because I looked a certain way, or I was in a room with people. I wasn't there for my intellect, okay? I wasn't there because I had graduated from Harvard Business School and or have conversations and like all this thing. It was a social environment that I was in. And I had become very good at fashion and beauty, and I had gone to design school too. I did go to FIDM. I did have an education. So glad I did it because it really was the catalyst and the foundation for me to figure out what was I going to do? How was I going to support this little baby? You would think, and part of the problem was that the dad and I were having this dispute. So I was like, forget you. I don't need you. I don't want you. I'm going to do this. So that's where makeup artistry came in. I had met a couple girls in my travels that were makeup artists and had gone from doing fashion into music video and into television production. I thought, I can do that. I have a natural talent to do this anyway. I would always do my friends' makeup. I would do my own. It was something that I did. So that was the story of all of those things you mentioned in the beginning. Rest in peace, Rick James, but he was one of those guys that I met along the way that actually introduced me to Eric Dickerson. It was just like a really crazy, fun, wild life I had very early on. And it was the times. Things are different now, but I had a wonderful, wonderful experience when I look back at it. It was a crazy time.
Yeah. One of those anecdotes I liked was like how you got into the MTV music videos. You just show up and be like, hey, I'm a makeup artist. Do you need any help? Right? Wasn't that like, that was how you actually got into that industry a little bit?
Well, sort of, not exactly. I would never just show up on set. That was not, what I would do. But once I realized that I wanted to focus on makeup as being a source of income, that's how I wanted to make my living. I realized that I needed a portfolio. Back then, we needed a book. Right now, we have a link. But we needed a book. You actually had this leather-bound, beautiful portfolio, and you would have your tear sheets and your work, or you would make a reel. So when you don't have any background, you have to start somewhere. So you do these test shots. You convince photographers to take a chance on you and allow you to work on their sets so that you can get these pieces of evidence, really, that you know what you're doing, right? So what ended up happening was I was able to create enough of a book that I could go to production companies that were responsible for creating the music videos. And I would go in and show them my book. And I see it being done now in different ways, but basically, I am your value artist. I'm going to undercut the big agency makeup artists that you go and hire, and I'm going to give you the same results, and I'm going to be more efficient for your budget, and you should take a chance on me. Eventually, I was able to make a name for myself. The funny thing is like it was not the digital era. So your work really had to be good. There was no FaceTiming and
Touch up.
filters. No, I mean,
Yeah.
everything was retouching like frame by frame. It was a very different time. And so the less money they had to spend on retouching, the more valuable you became. So I became a very popular makeup artist because my work was really good. And this was
Yeah.
something I had a natural talent for. So I became very busy. And for many, many years, I started out a music video, which sometimes when you're a new artist, you don't have the power of a successful artist. So you can't dictate who's going to be doing makeup on your set. So I was very lucky that I was able to meet big superstars early on in their careers, and they took me with them because that's the best time to meet them at the beginning when they become
And then you grow with them.
and you grow with them, exactly, when they become popular. So that was pretty much the way I did it. It wasn't quite showing up on a set, but it was showing up at a production company and convincing them to take a chance on me.
Yeah. Let's fast forward. So now you've become this well-known makeup artist and you're creating your own products, which inevitably led to you actually creating Beautyblender, the company. And at least from what I've read, it took you 10 years to get your first $1 million, if that headline is correct. Regardless of that, whether that's perfect or not, it took a while to get moving. I'm curious, what were the kind of hardest lessons or hardest learnings you had during those early years?
Oh my God, so many. I don't know that we have enough time to talk about all the lessons that I've learned. And all the lessons are learned through catastrophes. Catastrophe is a good teacher. No, it's a professor, actually. It was a history of catastrophes. I'm not sure about the timing of it. 10 years seems a little long, but it did take quite a while. So, yeah, I became very popular. A lot of my artists would take me with them in their growth. A director named F. Gary Gray, who I did the first Friday movie with. And I met Gary because he was a PA on a music video, and then he became a director, and then he took me with him on his job. So I did Friday. Then Friday gave me the chops and the reputation to get into television. So when I got into television, one of the first shows I did was Moesha with Brandy, who was like a triple threat. She was a musical artist, she was a TV star, and she was a movie star, and she had tons of sponsorships. She was cover girl, she was the first Black Barbie, she was the first Cinderella, like all these things. I was so lucky. What that did for me is it actually introduced me to a young lady who was a writer. Her name was Mara Akilbrock, who is a very prolific producer now, and she created the show Girlfriends. And that's where Beautyblender was born, because Girlfriends was the first show being shot and broadcast in high definition video. So the makeups looked different. Mara knew me. I knew Mara. Obviously, the story, if you don't know, of four beautiful young Black women. And Mara was a modern, beautiful woman. She didn't want them to look like they were wearing a lot of makeup. So for me, I had developed a lot of different techniques in all of the years at that point of my makeup artistry where I knew how to airbrush makeup. Right now, there's makeups that are developed for airbrushing. But like everything else, back then, we had to create it for ourselves. So I knew how to do beauty makeup with Armani and these big heritage brands. I could break them down and blow them on their face, and it would look like really
Cool.
natural. I don't know who came up with the rule, but somebody said that airbrushing was the way to do makeup for high definition so that you look natural. So I had this talent. Mara knew it, hired me, ended up doing Beautyblender there because the one thing you cannot do on a set that's recording sound is run a compressor and an airbrusher because they're recording sound. So I had to learn how to keep beautiful airbrush makeups throughout the day. And by this time, I was a proud Local 706 union member. And if you're a union member, you get the privilege of learning tips and tricks by other makeup artists that have discovered things. So there was this makeup artist, her name is Kelsey Frye. She's still working. She does like Peaky Blinders and different shows now. I credit her with really giving me just insights of what I could do to a makeup sponge to make it look like airbrush makeup, basically. And she did G.I. Jane, and it was like this whole thing. She like showed us all in the union how she did G.I. Jane and Demi Moore's face and like all these things that she did. And I was like, oh, that could be very helpful to me on this show. Because the worst thing that you can ever do on a show is take your actor off the set. The director and everybody hates you when you do that. So that was how Beautyblender was born. I needed to find a way to keep these beautiful, flawless looking natural airbrush makeups on set without removing my talent. And so I started cutting sponges and wetting them and just experimenting. And yeah, here we are.
So I think one of the things I'm surprised about is now you've built this, it's a massive business, right? This business is doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue. I can't imagine that was the plan at the beginning.
None of it was the plan. The plan was to get married and have kids, which I'm still not married, but I do have kids. So
So I'm curious, one, what are the challenges of today? What is it like to run a business of this size? Because most people have not done that and probably will never do that. And I think the second thing is there's a lot of people that build a business to this size and they sell it and they kind of ride off into the sunset and whatever. But you've run this business for a while now, right? You're coming up on maybe 20 years, something.
Yeah. 20 years, 20 beautiful, lovely, but long years. Yeah.
So how do you think about the next 20 years? Are you going to be still running Beautyblender, or like what are your thoughts about the future?
To answer your first question, the management, oversight, and running of a business like Beautyblender, I'm a makeup artist. I'm not a business person. And I told you I had catastrophes.
Well, you're a business person now.
I am
We
now.
can safely say
no,
that.
I am. 100% I am now.
Yeah.
I have to reframe that for sure. But at my core, I am a creative and I am an artist. And I have had to learn the business end of running and owning and operating a business and a growing business, a scaling business, right? And it has been a challenge. What I find was challenging in the beginning is understanding budgets and understanding the numbers and how that impacts what you can do. Now, obviously, I still own my business 100%. I've never taken an investor. I didn't
That is so crazy, by the way. That is so
It
nuts.
is really crazy. It is really crazy. I didn't get some of the mentoring that some of my other founders that I talked to get to benefit from. So I did make a lot of mistakes. I probably wasted a ton of money, but I live a good life. Like, I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, the thing that I think is the most challenging for someone like myself that's starting a business and trying to scale it and grow it is understanding the finance part of it and the planning part of it and the efficiencies that have to go on in order for you to be profitable and to grow and to be attractive for someone to want to come buy your business. And that hasn't been my case. It's not that my business has been unattractive. That isn't why I haven't sold my business. I literally have not sold my business because I love and enjoy my business, and I never did it planning for an exit. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't expect an egg-shaped sponge to be a global phenomenon. I never could have, in my wildest dreams, ever expected to be in the Smithsonian honored one of 8 women in the last 100 years that invented a product that changed the industry. Like, never, never would I have thought an egg-shaped sponge, right? To answer the first part of the question, those are the really serious learnings that I had. If I was to say that I had mentors, it's not that there was never anybody there trying to help me figure this out. There was a woman, and still is a woman, over 35 years who has helped me and worked for me in some form of financial capacity. She was my bookkeeper, and now she's our controller. Her name is Ruth Reed. But I didn't really have the kind of mentoring that you might have if you have financial partners. So I would say that growing and scaling finances and demand planning is super important because that dictates your purchasing and that dictates how you spend your money and your cash flow and everything else, right? So I would say, aside from that, one of the things that I think about the most is managing personalities and people, teams, and how to keep people motivated and how to keep them engaged and happy and healthy and wanting to be on this journey with me. That's been a big eye-opening thing I never thought really about.
I mean, as it gets bigger, I always remember thinking about this when we started our company. It's like, okay, when there's 2 people, it's like, okay, I'm 50% of the company, right? And then you add another 2 people, it's like, well, now I'm 25%. You add some more, you become a smaller and smaller percentage of the work that actually gets done at the company. And so I think that your ability to bring in really, really smart people and really talented people You started with this woman as a bookkeeper, and now she's your CFO, right? She's been with you along this
She's
whole
not my
journey.
CFO.
Oh, controller,
She's my
sorry.
controller, yeah. But the CFO is another interesting story. Yeah.
What happened with the
Well,
CFO?
CFO was working at one of my accounting firms very early on, and he was a young accountant, very smart, and he happened to have a lot of knowledge of QuickBooks because we were using QuickBooks at the time. And I was just like, I don't know what the hell, so he came in and started helping us, and eventually we just offered him a job to come work with us and grow with the business. And he's my CFO now. His name is Eric Haight. He was one of those people eventually that started really helping me understand more about budgeting. But later on in the last 5 years, I've hired a really super smart guy named Kirsten Fisher. If there was ever, I would say, somebody that was the most influential in really developing and maturing my information about what I do on a regular basis, it's this guy, Kirsten Fisher.
Your original point, like being a founder, right? Being, whether it's an artist, finance isn't usually what you specialize in, but it ends up being so critical, particularly as you grow. We ran into that a couple of times. Well, one time in particular, we had like a really serious cash crunch because of one, bad forecasting, two, just some really negative outside events. We barely made it out. It's very underrated as a skill set.
I think it's a part of the entrepreneurial journey, though. And when I say entrepreneurial, I mean the real journey of starting a business from scratch and still owning it without outside investment. Because whenever you bring in those investors, they have a perspective and an experience that they're always going to bring to you that gives you food for thought, right? Or they control you, one of the two. I mean, I don't know. That's my fear. People ask me all the time, you still in your business? I'm like, yeah. I don't know if I'm smart or stupid.
I think it's definitely the dream of most entrepreneurs. It's just hard, right? It's a tough way to do it. So one of the other things I'm curious about from your perspective, and I've observed this really frequently. So whether it was like Anastasia with Anastasia Beverly Hills, where she built up these relationships with all of these celebrities and actors and actresses. So you see these celebrity artists, whether it's a makeup artist or a brow artist or a hairstylist, are having a lot of success launching their own brands. And my observation is like, okay, I built this relationship with Jennifer Lopez over the last 10 years. Now she's got 100 million fans on Instagram, right? Now she's one of the biggest publishers in the world. That's a huge advantage for me, right? As a business owner. It's like having a relationship with the editor at Vogue at its peak, right? Like it's just a huge advantage. And obviously that's the space that we're in, this kind of influencer marketing space. Is that something that you observed kind of having a big impact on your company and the kind of growth of the business? Was this social media revolution, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's a little different with me though. Anastasia's a friend and I love her and I admire her so much because she stays in it. She keeps socializing. She keeps connecting with all those people. Like I just don't have the energy for it. I don't know. But my celebrity is Beautyblender. So when I say that, I say it in two ways. So as a celebrity makeup artist that I am, my era of makeup artistry was a very strange time because technology was coming in, HD digitization, is that a word?
Yeah.
All of these new tools were coming in, but celebrities were the first influencers. So I say that Beautyblender was created initially by influencers before actual influencers came about, because the way that you would get your views or your likes or people following you is through magazines, right? So when celebrities would be featured in Elle or Allure or some of these magazines, they would say like, open your makeup bag. There used to be a feature in every magazine, like what's in your makeup bag? And they would dump out their makeup bag and there would be a beauty blender. I never asked them to put a beauty blender in their makeup bag. It would just organically happen. So Beauty Blender became the celebrity, okay? And it became the influencer. And like, as technology started to take off, we had MySpace, then we had Facebook, then we had Instagram, and then all of the different platforms. We never knew when a beauty blender was going to show up. And by the way, the big cosmetic companies and the Asian manufacturers we're not buying into Beauty Blender really being anything but a trend. So we were the only ones on the market. My team, I give them credit, but Beauty Blender, this little thing right here was the only one out there. And it was bright pink.
Yeah.
It was very noticeable. So she was like our first Jennifer Lopez. And like she was like, okay, we're gonna work her. We're gonna take all her views and all her fans, and we're gonna just multiply it, you know? I don't know what the actual question is about influencers, but I didn't come from the influencer area as a makeup artist. So I threaten every year that I'm going to go back to makeup and I'm going to start, because I know a lot of celebrities and I'm going to like reach out to them and I'm going to do their makeup. And then I'm like, nah, I don't think so. I'm good. But hands down to my lovey love Mario and my lovey love Patrick Ta and all the ones, Charlotte, all of you people still out there doing it. I give them so much respect because being a makeup artist is not an easy job.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have not done it day to day, but I mean, the schedule is probably not perfect all the time. You're working at weird hours. Like you said, trying to come up with things that don't piss off the directors, et cetera. It sounds challenging.
But not only that, but working with the celebrities themselves, you don't want to piss them off, right?
Yeah.
So it's a whole new world with them, though.
Do they have opinions on how they look on screen? Do they care?
Absolutely. 100%. Yes. Part of
I'm
the
very
job
big.
is, like I was really good technically at makeup, but the most important part of my job was the psychology of it. Making them feel comfortable, giving them what they want, preparing them to go out and be that person, whatever it is.
Well, so what's interesting about what you said before that, just to skip back a second, is you were talking about Patrick and Manny. And I have to imagine that those relationships and their love for the products played a really big role, right, in the success of the company, right? Or not so much? Did they not talk about the brand very much?
It's like frosting on the cake, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the fact that they are organic and natural supporters of Beauty Blender, look, it's a benefit, but I don't ask them to use my products. I don't, if they use it, they use it. If they don't, they don't. But it's a different world now. I think that being a celebrity makeup artist is definitely beneficial to being able to at least have the opportunity to create your own brand. But what you do with it, once you're there, is different because makeup artists aren't necessarily product developers. Like you have to start to learn what is going to be the future. What is the trend? What can you bring to the table that's unique? And that's where I was very lucky that Beauty Blender was something nobody had ever seen before. Because of social media and because there have been so many new founders with new products, it's very hard to find innovation. Everybody is trying to find the next Beauty Blender or something that's never been seen before or been used before, or considered before, or really just makes life easier, right? Because that's really the ease of Beauty Blender and the ease of the results is really what makes Beauty Blender popular. So the product development process is very different than makeup artistry.
They're in the details, like you were in the details, right? But I think that creating a product business is just a totally different skill.
Yeah.
Well, I've already used up a lot of your time, but I want to do kind of one parting show question. For other people that want to start a company like you did or begin this entrepreneurial journey, what would be your advice to them? What would be your guidance?
Everything is important, okay? In the beginning, the way you set your business up, the way you think about it, all of it is very important because it impacts what happens down the road. And you can't see what's down the road. You don't know what you don't know. So for someone starting a business, the very first thing I always say is you have to have a passion to get through the tough times, because we talked about it for a second in the beginning, but there are people that actually create businesses and create the exit plan before they even start the entry. And I don't know what that's like. So for me, you have to be able to endure the ups and downs, the trajectory of entering the business as an entrepreneur with the dream of exiting at some point is not a straight line. You're going to have ups and downs. You have to have the catastrophe learning moments. There's no way to avoid them and truly create the product of your dreams. Now, if you start listening to a lot of financial people that aren't necessarily creative, because They're very different, but sometimes financial people are put in charge of creative people, a lot of times. And it's two different languages and two different perspectives. So I think it's very important for someone starting a new business to understand that there are many ways to think about one thing. And you gain as much information as you can from the people around you that are experienced, but then you have to find your voice and your way to communicate with your partners and with your consumer and with your vendors, that you can translate your dreams to them so that you can actually get to that place where you're putting your baby out into the world and it looks the way you want it to look. Because that experience as an entrepreneur is very daunting. In the beginning, you have a lot of excitement and passion, but then you can be disappointed and disheartened along the way. So keeping your passion and remembering why you're doing what you're doing is super important, because you can lose sight of it.
Yeah, I mean, the irony of wanting to sell a business is that I think the only way that you build a business that people want to buy is you build a business that you never intend on selling. It's like you build something that's designed for the long term, that thinks about its impact, that you have passion for. I agree. I mean, there's 2, possibly 3 very near-death experiences as a business. We did sell the business, but it was after about 11 years. So it's not a 2-3 year thing, right? And even today, we're still inside. We rolled most of our equity. We're still building it. And that's because we're passionate about it. We enjoy it. I'm excited about it. I'm interested in the stuff that we're doing. It's something that fascinates me. So
I still wake up every day and love what I do. It's never a burden. I will say I was pretty naive, and I still think I am in some degrees. I mean, I'm more experienced, but I do have this dream in the back of my head. And I think that the reason why I'm still here and 100% owner of my business is because I think I had a dream about creating a heritage business. Maybe my daughter or my son or somebody in my immediate little inner circle would want to continue to run this business. So maybe in the back of my mind, I thought, well, maybe I'll be Estee Lauder, or I don't know.
yeah, totally. I love
Who
that.
knows, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Rea Ann, I am so glad we got to chat. And again, so impressed with your journey and fascinated. You certainly need to write a book, because you got to get it all on paper, because there's just we're scratching the surface here.
I'm losing memory cells. I mean, seriously.
But thank you again for taking out the time. I learned a lot. I'm sure other people will learn a lot too. So thanks again.
Oh my God, I'm so glad we finally got together, Conor.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.